What is going on, YouTube people? Neo Cards and Comics here for a live report on the front lines of the grading wars. That's right, the grading wars have arrived. PSA has fired the first major shot by rolling out $30 value service with about 18 different hoops, hitches, I's you have to dot, and T's that you have to cross. But nonetheless, the grading wars have arrived, and the battle is over your raw cards. That is what they want. That is what they are fighting to get. Who will come out on top? Nobody knows. All jokes and kidding aside, that's what we're going to talk about today. I had previously, as I discussed yesterday, I had, gone over the gem rate data, did a whole 15-minute long video on that, had it all ready to rock and roll for Monday morning, recorded it late Sunday night. And in the meantime, the PSA news came out with the value service and kind of blew that video up. I debated trying to salvage it. I just toasted it off into the ether. It goes, never to be seen again. We're just starting from scratch and taking a little bit of a different approach with this. So I have the gem rate data up on the screen. We'll discuss that a little bit, but I kind of want to just broad base this with kind of where we are right now as a state of grading in the card industry, sports card world, Marvel card world, whatever world that you're in. But if you want to send small pieces of cardboard off to a company to encase them in a piece of plastic and put a random number on it and increase your value, that's what we're here to discuss today. So, in my opinion, there are four major companies: PSA, SGC, BGS, and the melding of CSG and CGC, however you want to handle that. Those are the big four. There's a bunch of pretenders. There's a bunch of new kids on the block. There's a bunch of pop-up grading companies. Personally, I wouldn't touch them. I value my cards that I have. I am not sending them off to some random to evaluate, hold, touch, whatever, fondle my cards and encapsulate them for me, let alone assign a grade to them. I understand you may or may not like one of the big four grading companies. I get that. They all have their warts. You have four options to choose from. If you don't like one, you got three others. If you don't like three, you still got one more left. And all four are very legitimate companies. We may have questions, concerns, comments, and issues with various aspects of those four companies, but they are all four professionally run operations to some degree or another. PSA, obviously, the king of resale value. We are going to dive into some specific examples of pricing comps here at the back half of this video, and just kind of take a state of where we are right now in regards to, what's selling for what. Does PSA still perform the premium or command the premium that they do? BGS, SGC, how do they line up? CSG, the new labels, the new CSG grading scale, it is still way too soon to say what they look like. There's just not enough sample size out there on cards that actually matter. So I had to exclude them for the purposes of this when we get into talking about secondary market factors. So you have four really good choices to send to. PSA, currently, you have $50 economy level service. You have to be a member. It's about a 2 to 3 month turnaround time. That has slowed down a little bit, but it's about 2 to 3 months. My current order is just hit 2 months and is towards the tail end of the process. So I should get that back before the max 90-day turnaround time. You now have a $30 value option with them, but as we discussed yesterday, there are a bunch of hoops to jump through there. What we don't know, or what I'm not sure of anyways, there's a lot of confusion about this all over the place, is regarding where the 90 to 120 turnaround days starts with the new value service. Does it start from today? Does it start when the backlog's cleared? They're not real clear on that. They're clear in stating that these cards are not being graded until after the backlog is finished. But they're going to start processing on before the backlog is finished. So I don't know what that means. What has been speculated on, because Carlos talked about this, and it's been discussed on the PSA podcast as well, a large bulk of the PSA backlog is actually through the grading process. The bottleneck right now is encapsulation and shipping, not grading. So the early part of that workflow is light. They have room to operate. So that's probably why they want these cards coming through the door now. They want to prime the pump, as we've been talking about, to get work in the building, to have sitting there ready to go, because they need to feed the beast. We've discussed this a ton on the channel. PSA has a massive operation. They have spent a ton of money to expand, and they need to feed the beast. The beast has to be fed. The beast, as we can see by gem rates data, can grade almost 900,000 cards a month. They've been higher than this. I think 950 was their cap. They've almost hit 1 million, but they haven't done it yet. And this is before the New Jersey office comes online. That's not even in play yet. So that beast needs fed, and you need cards. That beast wants cards, and that is where the battleground now sits for your cards. The way I think this all ends up playing out, PSA is still going to be the dominant force. There's no changing that, at least in the short to midterm. They command the most resale value. They are the most liquid thing in the world. I've talked about it a ton before. Other channels have discussed it. When you walk into a room with, say you have a case with all 4 slabs in it, you're going to have a much easier time moving the PSA slabs than the other slabs. It just is what it is. There is more demand for that piece of plastic. Does it make any sense? No. Is it the way that it is? Yes. It's the same way in the real world when you think about it. Nike commands an extra respect, even though their shoes are the same or whatever as Adidas and whatever. Apple, people don't like, people spend a fortune for iPhones, even though a segment of the population will say the Droid is just as good or better for less money. We see this in every walk of life. You go down the list, brands matter. And Acura is basically a Honda, but with a cooler looking logo and a couple extra bells and whistles, and they sell for 50% more because it's Acura or Lexus or whatever, insert car company here. You see it across the board. This isn't like a new thing. We're Americans. We like our brands. We like to flaunt a name across something and say, look, I have the best. It's what we do. We're real good at it. So I don't know if I necessarily see that changing anytime soon. They are, to me, still going to be the flipper's choice. I want to maximize value choice. I want set registry choice. It is what it is. That's a large portion of the market in the modern space. BGS is the niche of niches choices. We've talked about this to death. They have a very limited subset of what I think is viable to send them a card for. And I forgot to preface this. I am talking about this in regards from grading to resale. This whole conversation that we're about to have is grading to resale. Not PCing, not collecting, not your set registry. Grading to add value to the card to eventually sell or trade it later on down the line. Maybe that's as soon as you get it back. Maybe it's a year after you get it back. That's what the angle of this video is. So BGS, you run the numbers. It just does not make a lot of sense to use them right now. They have an economy level open at about $35, I believe, with a pretty far turnaround time. But as we'll see when we look at sales data, their slabs just do not command a premium on the market. They are liquid, but they do not command a premium on the market. SGC, I feel like, is going to be the collector's choice. They have a fervent following. For all the people that like to put in the comments, SGC is dead. I got SGC is dead in the comments yesterday on the PSA price drop video. That could be no farther from the truth. SGC existed before PSA, not before PSA, but they've been around for 20 years. They're not like some new kid on the block that just entered the fray during the boom. They've been around for a while. They have an extremely loyal fan base. They have an extremely loyal fan base when it comes to vintage. And Peter has developed a very good marketing presence. That company, people will go to war for that company. Look at the comments in a lot of videos. They have a very strong defense force. People love SGC, and they will grade with SGC for life. That's, or at least as long as Peter's there, or his legacy is there in that building. He has gained a lot of respect in the hobby community, and you understand why. You talk to him, I get it. I spent 3 hours talking to him, an hour on the camera, or an hour and a half on camera, an hour and a half off camera, and he's infectious. I get it. I 100% get it. I'm grading for resale, so to me, not everything makes sense to send there. That being said, if you're grading to flip, there is still an angle to send there. I think SGC's niche is going to end up being collector-based. They're going to want to go for the collector base, and they're loyalists. And I think their angle is going to be, we are going to have lightning fast turnaround times. I think that's going to be their approach based off of just the vibes that I got from him. And just you can kind of see it in their modeling. Right now, they're sitting at like a 14 to 16 day turnaround time. I think they want to get it less than that. I think that might be their angle. Everyone's saying, hey, SGC needs the price drop. SGC needs the price drop. What if they stayed at $30 a card and there was no turnaround time? Would that be something that would interest you? If SGC said it's $30 a card, your card walks in the door, and we have it graded and in the mail to you within 48 hours. There's a real good, you can churn and burn with them if you're just looking at this from the flipping perspective, you could churn and burn with them. Yes, you are going to take less on the resale end than you will with PSA, but when you actually sit down and run out the numbers, you could potentially make more money than you could because you're churning your inventory over and over and over again. Because you're getting the card back faster, selling it for a profit faster, taking that money, buying more inventory, rinse and repeating over and over and over and over and over again, faster than you are with PSA, even though you might get more on an individual card premium. But if it takes 3 months to get back to you, and in the meantime, SGC is sending you cards back in 3 days, once again, this is fairy tale land, but we could potentially get there. If their demand slightly lessens because of the PSA pricing shenanigans, any grading company, and the turnaround times get faster, and they don't change pricing, or maybe they just drop ever so slightly because maybe the angle that they decide to take is, hey, we're going to be 20 to 30 bucks, 25 bucks, 30 bucks, whatever it ends up being, but we're going to turn your card around to you in 48 to 72 hours. You ship it to us on a Monday, we grade it on a Tuesday, it's in the mail back on its way to you on a Wednesday. What if that was their angle? You can make a nice little profit flipping SGC slabs, churning and burning that. Yes, PSA is still going to sell for way more, but if you have to wait a long time to get them back, it might not make sense for every single card, especially mid-end to low-end. Just depends. I think that's the spot where SGC is going to try to sit, and I think they could sit at a strong number 2 with that, or at least right there with BGS. They're already right there with BGS in regards to secondary market pricing. BGS has to do something. They need to come out and talk to the people, explain what's going on, explain what they're doing. They have no face, no forward speaking presence. They could have done so much over the last 2 years to just communicate and be transparent. That's all we really want. We want communication and transparency. Whether it's a figurehead of the company, whether it's going on YouTube channels, just literally posting updates on IG. Hell, HGA is doing that more frequently. HGA gives us better communication updates than BGS does. It's wild. It is wild to me that a company like BGS has such a poor messaging system in place. That is the one thing that they have to fix to gain trust back. And a little bit more transparency on turnaround times. And for the love of God, please update your website. It's like submitting cards in 1996 when you try to send Beckett cards. They do have a resale problem. I think a lot of that goes back to their grading scale. The whole BGS 9.5, Min-Gem Plus, all that nonsense, True Gem. People just don't want to deal with that stuff. They just want 10s. And that's why CSG changed their grading scale. CSG, I think they're going to be the go-to for low-end stuff and eventually, potentially gain more market share as things go on. They are the cheapest way to grade a card, even with their price increase. I do think the price increase was oddly timed as these companies are attempting to gain market share, most certainly them, as they just kind of went through a rebrand and a new grading scale, new label, all that stuff. And then the suddenly increased prices, I know it was a small increase, but to increase prices after the fact, whether or not it actually affects your incoming volume, I think it's bad optics. But I don't know the real reasons behind the price increase. My assumption is it's just general inflation based, which if that's the case, it is what it is. It probably had to happen. You bite the bullet and you need to do it. Speaking of CSG, I'm actually in talks with CSG to potentially have a representative or two on the channel, a la when Peter was on. I am still scheduling / working that out, so stay tuned for that. We may get a couple CSG people and CCG people on the channel to kind of discuss things. We'll see what happens with that. If we could get schedules to cross, I'm hoping that we can. I would very much like to have them on. I think there's some very interesting discussions to have with them, just along the lines of, you know, the whole rebranding process, the thought process behind that, all that sort of stuff. I think there's very, very interesting conversations to have there with CSG. The thing that I don't know, like from a gem rate perspective, you know, he has both companies listed out separate, CSG and or CGC and CSG. I am curious how they treat that internally, because to me, I view them as two separate companies. I saw some people in some comments and some videos a couple days ago being like, well, if you combine them together, they're putting out the second most output. I don't know that they should be combined together, to be quite honest with you. One, they're two completely different labels. CGC uses a blue label and is TCG cards only. CSG is their new label and is sports cards only. CGC still uses the old grading scale. They don't even use the same grading scale. CGC still uses the old grading scale with 9.5 as the primary gem mint grade, and then they have a 10 and then a 10 plus. And then, you know, there's the CSG new grading scale where 10 is the gem mint grade. So I don't know that it's fair to compare those two. I don't think they're the same grading teams. If I have CSG representatives on, this is one of the questions that I want to ask, is the delineation between CGC and CSG, because I think it's quite separate, even though people want to lump them together, and the markets treat them drastically different. Now, CSG, once again, not a lot of sales data out there yet on them, so it's a little hard to tell, but they have the cheapest prices by far in regards to grading, and they by far and away, and it's not even close, have the best slab on the market. It is not even close. Their actual slab is by far and away the best. That thing is crystal clear. Cards look fantastic in it, and they feel great in hand. The label, completely non-offensive. It is perfectly fine. You're not going to win the hearts and minds of people with that label, but you're also not going to annoy people like you did with the old green label and just push people away from you because of the label. So it's doing its job just fine. Slab itself, absolutely the best in hand. Just fantastic. Cards look great in it. If you have never held a CSG slab, I encourage you, if you're out at a show and you see some in a case, just ask a dealer to just check the slab out. Very, very worth it if you've never had one in hand. I would, if I was grading for PC, I would strongly consider sending stuff to them for PC just based off the case alone. I don't necessarily have anything I would send them right now, but like if I was sending in a thicker card for PC or even for grading, I think I would send it to CSG over Beckett, to be honest with you, because I like the case that much better. So we'll see how they end up coming out. Now, they obviously have the Blackstone angle of the big bad parent company that has Fanatics ties. They have the eBay authentication thing. Does that ever grow? That would be something else I'd like to discuss with them. You know, is there ever an option to grade the card with CSG while it's there for authentication? I have to imagine that's on a whiteboard somewhere. Whether or not it happens, who knows? But, you know, that's something that potentially could come out of the works as well. So that's where we're kind of at right now. And then, you know, as we move forward from here, what happens? You know, the pricing wars start. We've already seen PSA fire the first salvo. And then what do these numbers look like as we get deeper into the summer and move towards the national and then into the fall? With the PSA price decrease, we'll now start to see how that affects the other companies. There's going to be some lag time on this, but like within the next month or two on the gem rate data, we know what SGC, BGS, and CSG are doing right now. None of those companies, other than BGS, essentially have a backlog. SGC, CSG have a 14-day backlog and maybe like a month-long backlog at most at CSG. So there is no real backlog there. So once you start getting past those 2-week increments, like with SGC, you'll start to see if demand for them is tailing off. If the turnaround time starts to shrink on SGC, if they go from, if they're putting out the same amount of cards, but turnaround time goes from 16 days to 12 days to 10 days to 8 days, that's how you know less cards are going to them. And then eventually that'll play itself out in the gem rate data. PSA, by dropping prices, is trying to get ahead of the game to keep cards piled up in their warehouse for that machine to grade, like we talked about at the top of the video. Let's dive in and look at some price comparisons and wrap this puppy up. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like 8 cards. We'll just roll through these pretty quick so this video ends up not being too long. Once again, we are looking at PSA 10, SGC 10, and BGS 9.5. Why? Because those are the 3 gem mint grades. I don't understand why BGS people freak out when you use BGS 9.5 and compare it against a PSA 10 and an SGC 10. Those are the same grades. Just because one company has a wonky grading scale doesn't make a different grades. Those are the 3 gem mint grades: PSA 10, SGC 10, BGS 9.5. Not an SGC 9.5 or a PSA 9 compared to an SGC 9.5 or whatever. Compare gem mint grades. Once again, CSG, I left off of this just because there's not enough good comps yet out there for most of the cards that you'd want to compare against. The other thing that I do, I only compare cards that have similar sales in the same week. This mostly applies for PSA and SGC. Some of the cards there just weren't good BGS comps on, but I just ran with them anyways because there was good SGC PSA 10 comps on. One of the biggest mistakes I see made when people do research like this or throw numbers at me is they compare a PSA comp from today to an SGC comp from 6 months ago. That doesn't mean a damn thing. It's completely irrelevant. The cards that I chose, what I actually do when I do this is I look at CSG 10 sales first. What has recently sold in the last 7 days in an SGC 10? Take that, run the market movers graph, and look to see if there's PSA 10 sales around it. Almost always there are. So I look at SGC 10 cards first and then backdoor that way because I want sales within a couple days of each other. Otherwise, it doesn't make any point to talk about it. It just doesn't. So with that preamble, let's go ahead and dive in. First up, and we're going to talk baseball, basketball, and football. And like I said, I'll try to move quickly through this. And we're going to talk a bunch of different price levels as well. Vlad Refractor Topps Chrome. Nothing fancy about this card. And all these have all had sales within the last 7 days, give or take. PSA 10, $250. BGS 9.5, $165. SGC 10, $164. Nothing has really changed with that. SGC 10, BGS 9.5, pretty much in line with each other. Next up, baseball again. Miguel Cabrera, 2,000 Topps traded. Come down here to the bottom. We have a PSA 10 doing $510. That was on June 3rd. A BGS 9.5 on June 2nd for $320. And a SGC 10 for $200 on 6/3. So in this case, quite a big gap between the SGC 10 and BGS 9.5 and a massive gap between PSA 10 and SGC 10. So, and a pretty big gap between those two as well. But clearly, once again, the PSA 10 well ahead of the pack on the other two cards. Next up, Anthony Edwards Silver Prism. There is no BGS 9.5 of this, but there was an SGC 10 sale. And I like the idea of just using this because it's an ultra modern NBA card. So it seemed like a pretty good example. PSA 10 going for $850. SGC 10 going for $600. I should have mentioned on this Miguel Cabrera, if you blow it out 90 days, you don't see much change of the trend line. The PSA line is slightly trending down. The SGC 10 line is trending down harder, and the BGS line is staying relatively flat. On this Anthony Edwards, if we blow it back 90 days, similar thing. Basically, all three are actually flat to ever so slightly trending down when you look at this. If you look at the dotted trend lines, very slightly down on all three. But there's no narrowing of the gap over the last 90 days. Those basically stay apart pretty equally all the way across. Next up, Barry Sanders 1989 Score rookie card. Absolutely iconic card. Come down here, look at the numbers. SGC 10, $475. BGS 9.5, $325. So a flip-flop on this one. SGC 10 slightly outselling the BGS 9.5, but massive premium on a PSA 10, $1,200 on a PSA 10. So more than double SGC 10 and more than triple a BGS 9.5, which is wild. Wild times. And same thing here. You see the PSA number ever so slightly trending down, SGC number trending down a little harder, and the BGS 9.5 number staying flat-ish. But massive price discrepancy between those cards. Joe Burrow Prism Disco, PSA 10 and SGC 10. Once again, 90 days. We'll start with this. The PSA 10 is actually trending up slightly. The SGC 9.5 trending down slightly. Come down here and look at the numbers. PSA 10, $850. SGC 10, $500. So a substantial gap still between those two cards. Justin Herbert Field Level Silver, both trending down. Gap not really closing. You can see green line PSA trending down, purple line SGC trending down, and then there's actually one blue BGS 9.5 sale in there. Come down here and look at the numbers. PSA 10, $950. BGS 9.5, $675. To be fair, that was almost 3 weeks ago, and the card has trended down since then. SGC 10, $570. So at the time that this BGS sold, it was right in line with what SGC was doing. You can see it's sitting right on the purple line. So I think if that one sold today, it would probably be around that same SGC 10 price, but still a $400 price gap from an SGC 10 to a PSA 10 with no narrowing of the gap. Next up, Justin Herbert Base Prism. Once again, nothing fancy here, just a base Prism card. Trying to see the low end, the mid end, and then we'll look at one high end here last. Base Prism PSA 10 going for $330. SGC 10 going for $210. And a BGS 9.5 going for $210. All sales within a couple days ago. And once again, PSA line ever so slightly trending down. BGS 9.5 line trending down a lot harder. And an SGC 10 line ever so slightly trending up. So that is one where the SGC 10 is actually closing the gap a little bit on the PSA 10 base. And then last but not least, and the only reason, once again, I picked this because there was a recent sale of it, which makes this handy. And there was actually a recent sale on all three, which seems a little rare. So it seems like a good opportunity to look at this. Luka, rookie ticket, contenders, auto, optic. We have a PSA 10 on 5/22 selling for 7.7K. We have a BGS 9.5 on 5/24 selling for 4.1K. And an SGC 10 selling for 3.9 on 5/31. So absolutely massive price difference on an SGC 10 to a PSA 10. You're talking almost $4,000 difference. Actually, yeah, just under $4,000 difference on an SGC 10 compared to a PSA 10. No real trend data here because they just don't sell frequently enough in the other categories. But I just found this interesting because each company had one recently sell, and on a card like this, you just don't see that often. So anyone out there trying to tell you that PSA, the gap is narrowing on BGS and SGC is just not the case. It's not getting any bigger, but it's not getting any smaller on most cards. It's essentially the same that it has always been, or at least in recent memory. There may be certain examples here and there. We looked at 8 different cards. There was one, the Justin Herbert Base Prism, where it was slightly narrowing the gap between the two. And I'm not sitting here running numbers in regards to $30 send this card here and $50 send this card here. That's what you should be doing if you're sending things in the grade. You should be running the math and running the numbers on that card to see what company makes the most sense. There's going to be some cases where the quick flip, churn and burn is going to make more sense with SGC. There's going to make some cases where that makes more sense with PSA. Maybe with BGS, maybe with CSG as well. The PSA premium is still there. I don't see it changing anytime soon. That doesn't mean you can't make money with the other companies. It's just different strategies. If I could flip 10 cards in the amount of time that I could flip 2 cards with a PSA submission versus an SGC submission, if you're churning and burning mid to low end, there's a play to be made there. And in the long run, you'll probably come out further ahead than what you would playing the PSA game. On mid tier and upper tier cards, it's still PSA or bust for me. For most stuff. Like I said, it just kind of depends. Got to sit down and run the numbers on this stuff. But as of right now, that is the landscape that we are at pre 2 months before the National. 59 days, 57 days, whatever it is, the number that's floating around out there before the National. And we'll see what happens from here. PSA is now putting downward price pressure on the other companies. How do they respond? What do turnaround times look like going forward from here? I don't know, but I'll be fascinated to watch it all play out. I really enjoy digging into the grading company shenanigans. To me, it's just, I don't know why, it just intrigues me. I like the machinations of the grading companies, just the whole enterprise, how it works, how they compete, just the whole nonsense. I really enjoy that. I don't know why I do, but I just do. I enjoy talking about it. I enjoy discussing it. I just think it's fascinating. Maybe some of y'all find it boring, but I find it interesting. So that's all I have for you guys and girls today. Smash the like button if you haven't. If you're not subscribed to the channel, what the hell are you all doing? Any comments, questions, or concerns, leave them in the comments down below, and we will catch you guys and girls on the next one. Peace.